the local school, and Reza, who's program manager. Naila will be doing the interview. We're not going to chit-chat much. Last week we spoke about girls, and this week we're going to speak about boys, specifically boys underachievement. Naila, last week we ran out of time and we had amazing speakers, and this week the same. So we're not going to talk much. We're going to go straight into it. Could you introduce them?
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. You are listening to us live on radio 88.7 FM. You can WhatsApp us on 07748 855 055. You can listen online at www.radio.fm, or you can download the Android app. You can listen to us on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Okay, so today's topic on managing change, we're going to be looking at the boys and some of the statistics that we found and some of the evidence is saying that our minority groups are struggling. Okay, so what are the implications for this? So if we talk about the boys in general, in terms of the general population, in terms of census statistics, there's about 70 million people living in the UK. And of that population, 13% are of an ethnic diverse background. Now, you might think to yourself, well, that's not a big deal. Okay, so we're all doing really well, but different ethnic groups are doing better than others. One of the things we noted is that girls from ethnic diverse backgrounds are doing better than boys. So they're coming from the same backgrounds, they're coming from the same sort of social, economic backgrounds, etc. But for some reason, the boys aren't doing as well. Now, if we're talking about population in terms of amount, that's about 10 million people, okay, in the UK that are from a non-white background. Now, a quarter of them are in prison. Okay, so what are the implications and the consequences of that statistic? So let's go back to the beginning. Obviously, we have to talk about family dynamics. So is there something that's going on in the family dynamics that may be causing this situation to arise? Obviously, we've got the issue that maybe parenting styles might be focusing on males being treated differently to girls. There may be more freedoms, less boundaries. The Shazad effect, where we feel that the son is going to be providing for us economically, socially, emotionally, and therefore there's perhaps a bit more a looser control or social control issue regarding boys. It could be that they have more freedoms when there's bonding activities going on between males and their fathers or their external, males in general. What you tend to find is it's outdoor activities. So it's football and things like that. So bonding activities like that, which is different to girls. So girls are doing things that are indoors, a bedroom culture, dolls, role play. They're much more ready and ready to go to school comparatively to boys. Okay, the second factor is fatherless families. So we do know that Leicester is number 5 on the divorce rate. Okay, so we're quite high. We talked about that last week. The other factor we can understand from that is if the father is absent, then males growing up may not find who is my template, who is my masculinity, who's my identity, where do I look for that? They may come to school, primary school predominantly is full of females, so they may not see their identity there and think, well, okay, I'm disengaging, okay? They don't enjoy reading. And most exams will have some form of reading, even in maths papers now. You will have to write something down, you have to read something, there has to be an engagement of that. There is an element as well, emotional learning. So if I just throw this question out to you then, so to our guests, so to Jason, to Rosa and Anila, okay, tell me what was your favourite subject?
I'm an English teacher. Surprisingly enough, my favourite subject at school was English.
Okay, Rosa?
Science.
Okay, Anila?
Probably English.
Okay, now, why? Why was that your favourite subject? Was it, and I'll ask you a question, was it the subject or was it the teacher?
I'll go first. It's both, I think. If you have an inspiring teacher, you're able to kind of like work, closely with the subject at hand, understand experiences based on the teacher who's able to show and demonstrate that expertise. I had fantastic teachers in science. They inspired me. I have had teachers in geography. They didn't inspire me.
Okay,
right?
that's taking me to my next question. So Jason, what was your experience?
Yeah, so Alan Sherwood, who was a teacher at Winstanley, taught me English. I think had quite a profound impact on me.
Okay then, so let me flip the coin. Anila, you were staying very quiet there in the background.
It was my teacher as well, Mrs. Eyre. I still remember her.
Okay, so let me flip the coin for you for a minute. Think of your worst subject and the worst, the lesson, the teacher. What was it that was giving you the vibe?
It was science for me.
Okay, what was going on in science for you, Anila?
We just had a constant supply teacher.
Okay, so you couldn't connect with that person or the subject?
No, the kids were always, boys particularly, were always rowdy in the class because it was a supply teacher.
Okay, what about you, Reza?
It was maths. It wasn't a problem with maths itself. It was a problem with the school policies. They decided at some point to change from top set, bottom set to mixability. And they took a subset of top set and subset of bottom set and put them into mixability. And what ended up happening was that, people who were in a higher grading system just didn't get out above C. I had some issues there and rectified it with the head of mathematics after taking some serious exams, and they could show the aptitude that I could move forward.
Okay. Now, the reason why I mentioned all of that is that most people are emotional learners, okay? If you like the person who's giving you the information, you can connect with them, they're going to raise your game, okay? So teacher is really important, okay? So sometimes it might be that you don't have that confidence. That's what the teacher's trying to do, right? They're trying to engage you, they're trying to learn, so it's about having that relationship. So often, boys, if they don't connect with the person who's giving them the information for whatever reason, then they're going to switch off. And this is one of the things when I'm talking to students, and I'm working with quite a lot of different schools and colleges in the city, this is a common theme that's coming through. When I'm talking to young people, they say, I'm not engaging because I'm not connecting with the person who's delivering the content to me. Okay, then, so there's obviously hormones and peer groups. So tell me about your experience, Jason, then. So when you were a young man, what was your experience of school? How was your friendships influential in some of the decisions that you made?
Yeah, I think by and large my experience at school was a positive one. I wasn't brilliant at all my subjects, but I enjoyed school. I had good friends who looked after me, who I stayed the course of time with, who are still friends now. So I by and large enjoyed school and, was also involved with sports and other things, and it was a positive experience for me. Good.
What about you, Reza?
This would probably be too long for this session, but a completely opposite reaction here. So I was brought up in an environment which was a quite aggressive environment. I was born in a place where BNP was pretty much the head of the town, the core of BNP, being County Town in London. And being of only two Asian families that actually had business or some presence in that area, we were subjected to a lot of aggression from the community there at large. So my schooling, in summary, wasn't a great schooling from being in such an environment from infant school and primary school, and also the other side of this is after being moved around 20 times in London. I had the other side of it where I saw a lot of prejudice, living predominantly with an Asian community and seeing the different side of things. So my schooling hasn't been that great, but I've had to live with the challenges and move forward.
Okay, so let me just throw the question back to you. So tell me about your family background then. So Rosa, we talked about fatherless families and, was your father an influence in your life?
He certainly was. I should say that my father was a hardworking person, from Pakistan, not educated to the high levels as my mother is, but he moved around. He worked in different regions of the country, Singapore, Maldives, and so on and so on. He has been an inspiration for me because primarily in a harsh environment, he has built up an empire, from scratch, and has shown that he's able to also help the community at large, and actually host various different officials around from various parts of the countries, also globally. And for me, what's really kind of stood out from my father is not what he is able to achieve, but how he presents himself. Being humble as he was, being able to, deliver things in such a manner which was inspiring to me. So I'll leave it there because there's lots to be said about my father.
Okay, so he was quite an influential, and it was again with our case last week, with our shows, where the girls were talking very much about how the family was a very important factor. So let me open the question to you, Jason. So what about your home life and your family situation? What inspired you to be where you are today?
Humble family, white working class background in Braunston. Certainly my father was quite a dominant figure. I think in many ways school was perhaps an outlet for me. My father, a hard-working guy, provided well, but certainly was a dominant figure, at times a slightly aggressive figure, and I think I've got an older brother who's 5 years older than me, who didn't respond well to school. My parents had good aspirations for us in a sense, but they weren't particularly educated. They didn't want me to go to university or whatever. They wanted me to go to school, get a job, and get married. They were their aspirations, and there's nothing wrong with that. But certainly my dad didn't care too much whether I worked hard at school. I did, but my brother didn't. My brother was 5 years older, and my brother, I think, struggled at school because he was often fighting, quite toxic masculine, was excluded from school, failed at school, and then struggled with resilience, struggled with jobs, left school quite early, had quite a few substance abuse issues, was a drug addict. And I suppose seeing my older brother do that and that influence I guess threw me into school a little bit, really. And
so did you feel that, Jason, that experience kind of gave you you wanted to do things differently?
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to do things differently.
And you were perhaps maybe thinking that perhaps education, success in school, down the university would take you down a different pathway?
Yeah, I think I wanted to avoid confrontation. I wanted to avoid fighting. I wanted to do things in a different way. I wanted to read. I wanted to learn. I wanted to communicate in a different way to perhaps the way I'd been shown sometimes at home.
Okay, that's really interesting. Anila, tell me, so you're a mother of 5, okay? Do you feel that your parenting style influences how you treat your girls and boys?
I'd like to say no, but my husband's here.
So,
but inevitably, girls and boys are different, and the way, my girls are older than my boys, so in terms of parenting, I did find the girls. My boy's easy as well, but in terms of school, I have to encourage him a bit more because, like Jason said, the toxic masculinity is forever present, and so I have to remind him that, look, that's not who I want you to be. Funnily enough, actually, he went to my side of the family over the holidays, and my brother picked up, oh no, he needs to walk a bit more, with his shoulders back, and he needs to have a bit more presence. And I was telling my husband, and I said to my brother, look, I don't want to bring up a street fighter, that's not what I have for him. And he said, oh no, you've got to make sure he can protect himself. So it's still, that mentality is still present in the school, so it's hard work for the teachers to get on that. And I'm sure Reza will tell you, similar to Jason's story, that he had the whole he had to fight himself out of not being the bad boy and going the other way.
So do you think that there is an emphasis then, as males, and having gone through the experience, that there is a pressure for you to kind of rebel and not kind of conform? And is that a social pressure, toxic masculinity, do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think that's true. And certainly when I was growing up, I think that, the certain stereotypical notions of what it is to be a man, whether that's about being strong or dominant or aggressive. I think I was brought up that way, and I think that still exists. And I think whilst I said earlier, some of that I tried to move away from, I still recognise it within myself.
You can't ignore the childhood experience.
Yeah.
For me and my perspective on this is that it's a matter of acceptance. So, depending on the environment you're in, the level of acceptance from other people is what's going to have an impact on you. So
the friendship groups and the peer groups are really important.
Correct. And also, the kind of lens that people see you from, right? So if you're in my situation, when I was younger, when I was at infant school, for example, I wasn't accepted. I was in a white-classed environment. I was an outsider. I would be chased by, older boys, teenagers, chased by dogs, and all sorts of things, right? In my younger years. And, for me, I could never fit into that environment, after being bullied a number of times and then saying no more based on being inspired by other people. So it's that presence that, actually I've got to get to a stage in my life where I can continue taking abuse or I can stop and do something about it. And so there is a pressure, for certainly people in certain environments to stand up. And some will take the abuse and it will destroy their lives. And some will go forward and say, you know what, enough is enough. But again, the road you take is a very dangerous road. And I can tell you that from experience.
Okay, then. So let me ask you another question then. So who are your role models?
So, go on, I'll let you, because
okay, I'll throw the question back to you, Jason.
I suppose I could go back to that English teacher who was a role model. And I don't sound too critical of mum and dad because they did a good job. My mum's definitely a role model. And I don't know, I guess growing up, fairly typical, I was interested in music and certain musicians I thought were role models. I'm not sure.
Okay. What about you, Reza?
So I would say that I wasn't really had a major interest in terms of celebrities and these type of things. I mean, to be honest, I was far more interested in trying to get on with life in my younger years. But my father had a presence, and presence in the sense that not that he was there physically present, but in the sense that, seeing the abuse happen even in front of my eyes, a bunch of boys or men coming through and having a fight with my father, and my father lashing back as well, showing that he's not going to take any more abuse from any people from the community. It felt like, I've got to step up as well, like my father has, like my brother has, and so on and so on. And so what ends up happening is that, you realize that actually my father can do something about it, therefore I can do something about it. And seeing him in different lights as well, working the business, doing what he's doing for the family, being spread very thin,
So he had a good work ethic. And did you feel that work ethic was something that you admired?
Of course, I mean, work ethics for me is more about morals and ethics and how you conduct yourself, not just with family, but also what is outside. And I think, yes, my father has played a massive role in demonstrating and showing and training his kids that this is a really important thing. I mean, for us, for example, I mean, it might feel strange to the audience, but for us, it was like, my father would be upset with me if my shoes were not polished, right? If I weren't wearing clothes that were adequate to his befitting, right? So, he would say, you have to be polite. He would have a principle, for example, if this is an amanat, meaning something a trust or an object that belongs to somebody, then you must look after it better than your own object. These are the kind of principles I've been brought up with from my father. So, hey, yes.
So the Sunnah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the whole idea of, the manners, the akhlaq, the behavior, the honesty, the integrity.
I couldn't tell you the source of it because my father at the time was not a practicing Muslim at the time.
So he would have had the akhlaq from what you're saying?
Yes. I mean, he had a soft heart. When
like
it comes
the Prophet
to matters
sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yes.
Okay.
So
right. So I'm going to just fast forward the story a little bit then. So Rosa, tell me about your schooling experience. And so you said that you had quite a challenging experience at school. So you've become quite successful. So obviously you did well at school potentially, and college, university. Where did you go then?
So schooling wasn't great. I mean, to be honest. I was sidetracked a lot during my schooling period for one of many reasons, and if you want to get into that, because I think that kind of showcases the troubles a lot of people get into and how it actually reflects in their lives and how that impact happens at schooling as well as at home. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of parents, that I've dealt with in my own experience, kind of missed the boat there slightly. So schooling for me is a really, really important area. Working with the teachers and understanding how you can improve that studentship, how you're moving along is really important. So building a relationship with the school is great, but making sure that process is there in place to help, your child is absolutely key. So I'm not going on a tangent here because I can see something being drawn to the left.
Yeah, I was just drawing my attention that you spent a little bit of time out of school for various reasons. Do you want to? So
I know this will come up. So like I said, I was pushed to left, right, and center when I was younger, and at the age of 6, I decided no more. So we, with a friend, we decided to. That's it. A black guy that I was very close with, Razak. We decided no more because we were the only ethnic minorities at that school, and during that process, that changed my life because that meant that I took no more bullying from anybody. I just stood up.
So you got into a fight?
Well, I get into fights, and I think fighting has been the kind of key drive to actually showing that I can get some respect in early years of my life, whether I'm at infant school, whether I'm at primary school or secondary school. And in the process of, all the way through from infants to, primary to secondary, I've been excluded 7 times, expelled twice.
Now, you represent some statistics there because ethnic minorities are more likely to be suspended or permanently excluded from school. So again, this has an impact in terms of the legacy life chances, but you seem to have turned it around.
Well, like I said, I think, there's a certain point in your life where you realize you need to see something better. And if anybody has an opportunity to seek a life that they can just have a glimpse of and realize, well, there is life outside the M25, for example, because I can tell you, some people have not even left the M25 of London, right? So if there is life outside and you're seeing it, it's a sense of inspiration. My father used to travel a lot. And because of his travels, I got to see a lot of things. And as a consequence...
Did that inspire you?
Yes. As a consequence, that you realize that you don't need to be tied down to certain life. You can do something about it. And so I did work hard in the latter part of my schooling years and did do extremely well.
So did you mature then? So you had a sort of a light bulb moment?
Well, I wouldn't call it a light bulb moment. I think there was inspiration from my sister as well. I do give her credit. She's a workaholic, has done extremely well academically. Whereas as my father would have said it back in the day, I don't think this. I mean, he said it in ordinary terms, so I can't try to translate. But I don't think this kid's going to get anywhere, as my father said.
And I think a lot of parents we say that because we do compare our girls against the boys. Because I've got girls and I've got boys. And the girls are they're just a different kettle of fish. And a saying that often is said, it takes, 3 girls to bring up 1 boy. Because they're hard work, wouldn't you say, Anila? Jason, what's your view on that? Because, obviously you're at a school where, you've got a lot of males in your school. What are your challenges?
Challenges are that statistically speaking, I think you mentioned at the beginning, boys underachieve at school compared to girls. That's certainly true at Judge Meadow, but it was also true in the school I worked at before Judge Meadow, which was sort of white working class school. So it's not confined to one community.
No.
That's for sure. Why do I think it happens? I think it's a bit of what we've talked about, which is the way we bring boys up and the way we bring girls up, and I think there's an element of that whole socialisation thing and being children where lots of the boys stuff is active and physical, and lots of the things that girls do are less active and less physical. And let's face it, if you've got to sit behind a desk and study hard, that in some ways is a more passive experience.
I totally agree, because we did some psychological testing and we found that when we asked boys and girls to sit down and concentrate on a task, girls could do it for 12 and a half minutes and boys could do it for 3. Okay, and so it meant that when we're talking about teaching and learning, that whole process means that we have to chunk things down into smaller pieces simply because they're struggling to cope with the workload. And also I think that the education system is becoming much more feminized in the sense that the jobs that males could go into, the kinds of things that they could be active. I'm struggling myself because I've got 2 going through exams at the moment, and one sitting there with schedule and getting on with it and getting up early, and then the other one is just like, I'm being caged, I feel pinned down, I need to do some sport, and I'm like saying, delayed goal achievement please, Let's stop the immediate goal achievement, stop the dopamine reward. The reward is, the short-term pain for the long-term pain. Come on. And it's really trying to get that point across, wouldn't you say, Jason?
Yeah, and I think the other thing as well, and we try against it, but I think it's true. I think we, as teachers, we treat boys and girls differently. I've no doubt about that, and I probably get criticised for it, but it's unconscious bias, and it's true. And I think, I've been doing this 25 years, and are my interactions, or have they been over the years with girls different to they are with boys? Yeah, I have to say that they have been. And I think we're more conscious of it now, and we talk about it more, and we recognise it more. But when I started this 25 years ago, I definitely treated girls differently to what I treated boys, and my expectations, and that reinforces the whole thing.
So did you have more expectation from the boys or less expectation?
I think there's bits around behaviour where boys get treated differently to girls, where they get sanctioned quicker, where they get told off potentially quicker. I just think that in the society we treat boys and girls differently, and teachers do it as well. And I think teachers are more conscious of that now, and we've got better. But that unconscious bias, I was brought up very, I said at one level I've moved against it a little bit, but I was brought up as a boy, there's no doubt about that, and all the stereotypes that go with that. You look after yourself, if you need to, you fight your corner, etc., and that stuff stays with you.
And of course, what will happen is that when girls, we have this as well at the schools that I've worked at, when there's girls having a scrap, okay, it's not taken as seriously as boys scrapping. Okay, so, it's the nails out. And
it's also the consequences aren't as bad, are they?
No, and I
Boys
think
getting into fights, someone's going to hospital. Girls getting into fight, there's going to be tears.
Yeah.
But, there's an interesting point you made there about the way schools deal with the different boys and girls. So I have 3 children at the same school, and the 2 girls are older than the boy. And the boy will get sanctioned for, getting off his chair, and he actually he's been at the school for 2 years now, and he's never 3 years maybe, and he's never been sanctioned. But now he's getting a bit older and a bit bigger. Literally gets off the chair and he's got C1. And I've noted, and Daddy's noted, that he's accumulated quite a few of those in the last few months. And we're like, what's going on? And then my daughters, who are older, say, Mummy, we've noticed that basically once you get a C1, you're going to keep getting them because you're on the radar of the teacher. So,
I definitely think that teachers, we do have a stereotype in our head of what a perfect student is. That they're dressed appropriately, they're sitting at the front, they're answering all the questions, they're engaged, and you're going to love them because, they're just the person who's doing everything you want them to do. And then there's, the one that comes in and chucks their bag and comes in late and they've not got the homework. And you automatically, without realising it, it's a bit like, I don't know if your parents out there, do you ever get that question? Who's your favourite kid?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and they all think it's them, right? And you have to be really kind of saying, I treat you all the same. Actually, if I put all your horrible bits together, you'd make a horrible Henry. And then if I put all your good bits together, then I'd make a really wonderful, honourable Henrietta or whatever it is. But the reality is actually, you have a favourite. You just don't say it. I'm just putting it out there. And then the same thing happens in the classroom.
Naila, our kids are listening.
I know, but I say that because they'll say to me, my mum doesn't have any favourites. I said, she does. She's not telling you. Okay, and the reality is that we do it as teachers as well. You naturally gravitate to the ones that are engaging and get you, and you get them. You can't help it. And then the student is doing your head in, okay? And again, it's those factors. Now, you can have that camaraderie and you can have that but when you get into the exam stage, it does have an impact. So let's draw the story forward then. So let's say you've gone to college, you've gone to university. So what happened next, Rosa?
Well, for me, so I think university was an eye-opener. I went to 3 different universities, and the 4th one for a scholarship for PhD, which I didn't complete. But for me, I think the eye-opener was not just the traveling, but the fact that I got inspired at some point during my university years with coming to the dean and getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and seeing a breath of fresh air in terms of mindset. And for me, the mindset, the change, it was a massive influence to me, who I am today. And I'm grateful for the brothers and sisters, certainly in London and globally that were involved in that process of nurturing and so on and so on. That said, it didn't start then. Actually, it started in the latter part of my schooling years.
So you were asking yourself, why am I here? Where am I going? Were you asking those deep questions? So do you feel that?
No, not just that. I know, sorry to interrupt, but it was very much that I felt that I had a duty upon myself to give back to the community. I learned from my mistakes. I'm not going to be talking about what those mistakes are in my early years. That could be another topic, another for our kids' advice. But during my latter part of my years, I'm talking about certainly between 16 and 19. I decided to give back to the community. I started working in youth programs and helping children come out of issues of bullying, youth clubs to get people off the streets, off drugs. I myself have been into a number of scandals where unfortunately, there has been weapons of use being, and so on and so on. So I wanted to make sure that there was less of an impact in the area that I was living in, some sense of assurity for the kids at the time, getting involved in youth programs, and even got involved into the Handicap Society, giving back to the community, getting my license and driving minibuses, so that I felt I could do something back for the community. And I think that was a starting change in my life before I moved on to university.
So do you think that perhaps maybe there's a process of young males, because we talked about dopamine reward, that it's all about you first, and at some point you decenter and you start thinking a bit broader, and then you're not necessarily being so self-destructive and toxic, and perhaps maybe then do you think that perhaps males mature at a slower pace, do you think, perhaps, than girls to come to that realization? Jason as well?
I don't want to talk for all males, but I certainly think I matured later than probably lots of girls. I think there's a truth in that. I think I tried to go to university when I finished my A-levels and dropped out after not very long, and then did some fairly mundane jobs that I didn't really want to do, and then finally went back to university. When I first, it wasn't when I first got there, it wasn't that I couldn't do the work, but none of my friends really went to university, and
was it difficult then for you because your peer group was doing something completely different, family situation was completely different, so you kind of felt like you were on your own?
Yeah, a little bit. And I first of all, I went to Leicester, and but I wasn't really hanging around with students. My friends had all got jobs, and so that didn't help. And then I think there was also an element where I did feel a bit like a fish out of water at university. And even when I went back, not something I massively enjoyed, but something I thought, well, I'm going to do this because I want to do something different. But yeah, and also an element sometimes where I felt quite cross, where I got to university and I expected everyone to be, super smart, and actually I spent most of my time walking around thinking quite disappointed and thinking, like, most of my mates that live in Braunston are a lot smarter than this. But I don't know. So I suppose there was a bit of a sort of class thing going on that I probably had a bit of a chip on my shoulder about.
Don't we all? Rosa, what about you? What was your experience in terms of moving from college and then university? As you said, you did the youth work.
Yeah, I mean, I guess college was no different from schooling. We still had the same challenges, to be honest, just a different age group. But I think between college and university was for me a big change outside schooling. So I pushed myself outside the hours to do well in education wise. But I think it's got to be more than that. And so, like I said, for me it's giving back to the community, giving back to the society. For me, I learned early on that I can help others who are less fortunate or not having the ability to do something, the bullying, for example, in schooling was predominant.
I think in the 80s it was a thing, wasn't it? I'm sure, Anila, you can say the same. They just saw it differently. It was much more physical back then. Now it's more technological, and they're very advanced now on the social media platforms, I have to say. And so it's a different kind of sophistication of what they can do. Before, you could embarrass yourself and maybe only a few people would know. Now everybody knows.
This is why I was saying earlier on, it's the lens, it's the perspective that people see you in. So regardless of whether it's physical or virtual, right? This lens is a very important lens, because if you see yourself with confidence, then you're able to walk the walk, right? But if you don't have that confidence, if you don't have that ability, And if social media is playing a massive role in your life, and someone tweets something, or it's going to have a moral effect on you. It's going to have an effect on you, your mindset, the way you're thinking about yourself. So these things are really, really key, and I think you need to challenge this, in our day-to-day lives.
Can we just touch on social media a bit? Because I think it's really interesting, the point that you made about social media having maybe, I would say, even a more detrimental effect to what it was back in the 80s, because like Reza said, just a small tweet can destroy somebody's reputation.
So, one of the schools that I'm working with, they've just banned the phones completely. They're not allowed on site at all. And they found that the concentration of those students is so much better. Back to how it used to be before phones were there. You just are not allowed. It's gone back to the old idea where you basically, if you need to contact your parent or your parent needs to contact you, they have to go through reception. And they're not having that engagement whereby they are doing a program whereby the phones are a massive influence in terms of the texting. And I think one factor that I would say, the online platform for homeworks, etc. One of the things that I've worked again with one of the schools that I'm working is that the parents are saying that the amount of online platform, because you say that the kid says, I'm in my bedroom and I'm doing my work, and they're gaming on the PS5, and you're thinking, hang on a minute, you're supposed to be doing your homework, but they're not. But if they didn't have that online platform, then you can't watch them all the time, can you?
I think this is one for Jason.
I'm not sure it is. I certainly, we take a pretty firm line at Judge Meadow on phones, and that place, obviously, basically at Judge Meadow, if you get your phone out, it gets confiscated, and it's meant to be put in the school safe, and you don't get it back till your parents come in. And by and large, kids are pretty good with that. Do some children have their phones out at break and lunch on the field? Yes, of course, they probably do.
Can I just ask about one other thing that could be a factor that, do you feel that males in general, when they're at school, often when you talk to students, I said, right, so what do you go to school for? It's about the friends, right? So it's not about the learning. Is there more of a challenge for boys, do you think?
I think with the phone thing as well, I'm trying to think about, when I grew up, but it seemed to me that, and obviously it's a different time, but you physically went out more and learned about the world and met people and travelled further, and I think probably our parents were less worried about what would happen to us.
That's right.
Because it was a different time, sort of like, you got thrown out, come back when it was feeding time. Whereas now I think that social interaction is all online, and that's so much more complicated, and and the things you'll tap into your phone are not quite the same as you would say to someone if you were face to face. I think it's really complicated, and it's a world I don't understand probably as well as I should.
Okay, moving the conversation on then. So let's talk about where you went after sort of degree. And so you were talking to us about, how your early years were quite challenging, second generation migrants, you've gone to university, you've done this youth work. Right, so tell our listeners, because we've got a few minutes left, how did you turn your life around to be successful? Because a lot of males, when they go off to college, university, or whatever, it is more challenging for them to get into those high, top brow jobs. What would you advise some kid out there that's listening, right, to take your path? What advice would you give?
So, I guess I'll think general here, right? So, for me, I think it's that you got to have a vision in life. You have to aspire to something. You got to have a plan that comes together, right? So if you are inspired to work in any industry, work for it. Go and do something about it. Study hard for it. Take the exams that are needed to do it. Work outside the hours. For me, I was inspired by my father. Although alhamdulillah, he was sufficiently wealthy and whatever, right? He always motivated me to say, stand up your own feet. So at the age of 9, I used to do paper rounds. At the age of 10, 11, 12 in warehouses. And I've been working throughout. I bought my own car, you got my own insurance. I did, pretty much bought everything by myself. So you've got to come to some sense of realization that I've got to do something for myself.
So you can't keep relying on the bank of mum and dad. You've got to be able to get out there. And do we think as parents generally, are we smothering our kids?
Yes.
And do you think that's necessary? Do you think it's detrimental? Because I was saying this to my kids as well. I said that, when we were younger, we would just go out on our bikes for hours, right? And you did come back and nobody was thinking, oh, there's a paedophile out there, there's a pervert out there, the parks are dangerous places. We just went out for hours. And they can sit in their bedrooms for hours, don't know what they're doing on the internet. And you're thinking, isn't that a little bit boring? And then we wonder why they've got anxiety and depression and, they're having panic attacks. Because another thing that I'm seeing a lot of with the schools I'm working with is performance anxiety. As we getting close to the exams, the amount of students suddenly feeling like, I've done nothing for 2 years, okay, and 6 months I've been out because of COVID in one block and another block. So the year 13s I'm working, some of the year 12s I'm working, some of the year 11s that I'm working with, they're all saying the same thing. I'm really scared about the exams because they don't know what to expect.
I don't think COVID's helped though, has it?
I think it's made a couple of the kids a bit feral.
Oh yeah, definitely. I agree with that. So mine are what? One's just gone to university and the other one's doing her GCSEs this year. So they were that COVID cohort. And I know that the scaremongering, just that BBC announcement that you used to have every day, it was scary in its own right, wasn't it? And I think that has had an impact, and I think we're going to see that impact for years to come.
And how's the challenge been for you, Jason? Running a school during the COVID period, has that been challenging for you in terms of filling in the gaps and encouraging students to stay on board? Because obviously with that much amount of time out, it's difficult to get everybody back involved and engaged.
Yeah, of course. It has been incredibly challenging, and it is about identifying the gaps and students building up their confidence again. I suppose the only thing what I don't want to do, and as I keep saying to students, is I really rally against this idea of, I don't like it when government, this lost generation. They'll never. I don't think that's true. Kids are incredibly resilient and incredibly amazing. And you know what? It's been a really weird experience for them, and yes, it's caused some problems, but they'll be all right, and they'll pull through, and they'll be resilient, and they'll be successful. And maybe, some of the benefits of this experience they'll learn from as well. I refuse to give up on them. I hate this, woe is me. It's all, we can't catch up. Yes, we can.
No, I totally agree with you. A lot of the kids that I'm working with, a lot of them are coming in panicked about what's going to happen. I just think it's almost like it's exaggerated to some degree. I just feel like, okay, you've been told what topics you have. Okay, it should be easy now. You just have to sit down and get on with it.
But again, doesn't this come down to social media or the scaremongering?
I just feel like you need to switch it off. And I think I'm very much of the. When I was at one of my schools that I was working at, they used to have it on every morning. That the briefing on BBC, in tutor time. And I was just thinking, I need to switch that off. Okay, let's do some mindfulness colouring. Okay, let's do something that's not talking about that. We can't change that, but we can change the mindset. Absolutely. And the best way we can change the mindset is that, let's deal with today. Let's not think about tomorrow and next week or next year. Let's see what we can do with today's situation, and then we can move forward in small steps. And I think if we do it that way, it's going to help. Yep. Okay, Anila, have you got any other thoughts? Have you got any tips?
Oh, gosh.
About rearing boys?
Well, to be fair, we're still rearing him, so I'll let you know in a few years.
And what about you, Reza? From your own experience, do you feel that, do you think boys need to be treated differently? What is it that we need to do to help them?
Yes, they do. Just one point around the phones and the social media. I have a policy which is, that home time is home time, and you've got to have this unity together as a family. So at the dining table or anything like that, you do not have a phone. You switch off. At work, I have exactly the same policy. I do not let my staff come in and have phones because I want 100% attention from them. And it works, right? Unfortunately, with the virtual stuff that we're doing at the moment, it's very difficult to get everybody's attention. So yes, boys do need to be treated differently inherently because they are different, right? They have a different nature.
Do you think that perhaps maybe what's happened often in schools and at homes, that perhaps maybe we use a more disciplinarian approach, and then that naturally creates a defensive response from the boys, and then that's when they disengage? Because what I found that I've done with because Jason and I used to work together in a previous school, and I found that I was quite a disciplinarian. But then I moved to Wigston, which is a very much working class white community. And I found that, there, a lot of them were quite broken. Okay, so I kind of mothered them a little bit. And that had a very different response, because when I was at Birstall, I'm saying this is how you're going to do it. It's my way or the highway. And it worked there. But I found that it just depended on what the cohort, the background, the social economic situation in terms of that situation would determine. I do think you have to treat boys differently. What do you think, Jason?
I think it's, like I say, I think high expectations, in terms of behaviour, but also I think, lots of positives, lots of praise, lots of positive reinforcements, find out something they're good at, focus on that. I know you can't just do the things you're good at, but for me it was about having something I was good at, that I enjoyed, that I could be successful at. You have to find some aspects where a student can be successful, and then you can build on that.
Okay. Well, we're running out of time. So, Anila, do you want to just sum up?
I'd like to say thank you to our guests, and let's hope and pray that we can bring